At the end of East Drive, in the small town of Pontefract, Yorkshire, stands an ordinary house. From the outside, it looks calm: a green lawn, a low brick home, white curtains in the windows. But since the 1960s, locals have whispered that something inside that house could never be explained. They simply called it the house on East Drive. The Pritchard family moved in during 1966, Jean and Joe with their children Philip and Diane. The house was new, built after the war on land that had once held a monastery and a gallows. No one believed that could matter. For months, everything seemed fine. Then one hot summer day, the phone rang, and Jean left with the children. Only Philip and his grandmother, Mrs. Sarah Scholes, stayed home. It was afternoon, the sound of city buses drifting through the streets. In the kitchen, white foam appeared on the floor. The grandmother tried to shut off the water, but the faucets were dry. The foam bubbled, then vanished, without explanation. That same day, damp stains spread across the walls. Water dripped from the partitions, but not from the pipes or the roof. The family called the water company. The technician inspected the house and said only,
"This isn't water from your system."
The next night, nobody slept. Doors shut by themselves, footsteps echoed on the stairs, and cold air crept from the hallway. Jean heard a glass fall in the living room. When she came in, it was on the floor, not broken, just wet as if someone had been holding it. The next day, Jean's mother visited. As she sat at the kitchen table, something brushed her leg. She lifted her dress and saw faint scratch marks.
"That must be your water,"
she said, trying to laugh, but the laugh froze in the air. Days later, the family came home to find sugar and salt scattered in perfect circles on the carpet. Jean cleaned them, came back 10 minutes later, they were there again. That night, stones and pins flew across the room. No one knew from where, no one saw a hand. Diane screamed as a pillow hit her face. That was the night Pontefract first spoke of a poltergeist. Jean Pritchard wrote to the local paper, and soon an investigator named Tom Cusack appeared. He brought a camera, a recorder, and documented everything the family saw. He wrote, "Objects move without touch. Water appears from nowhere. The walls stay cold." The newspaper headline read, "The house on East Drive, water, stones, and fear." After those nights, the house was never the same. From dampness and whispers came a presence, something you could feel even when the house was silent. Jean Pritchard later said,
"It wasn't fear. It was more like the feeling that someone was watching us from inside the walls."
Every evening, the rooms grew cold. Dark stains appeared on the stairs, sometimes like water, sometimes like ash. When Jean wiped them away, they returned by morning. In December 1968, things got worse. Philip was 15, his sister Diane 12. That evening, their parents were at the cinema, leaving only Philip and his grandmother, Sarah. Around 9 o'clock, a dull thud came from upstairs, once, twice, 3 times, as if someone were kicking the walls. "It's the wind," said the grandmother. But the wind doesn't move furniture or close doors. When Joan came home, she found Philip trembling in the corner. A blanket hung across the room as if it had been thrown. Then she heard it too. A voice from inside the walls. Soft, hoarse, not human. "Get him out." Weeks later, Jean brought a priest. He walked through every room, prayed, and said,
"Something from the old ground remains here."
As soon as he left, a picture fell from the wall and struck Jean's head. Diane wrote in her notebook,
Mom cried. She said she doesn't want this.
"But he's still here." By 1969, the presence began to show itself. First a shadow in the hall, then a shape in the mirror. Philip once said he saw a man in a long black robe with a hood. No face, only emptiness. In the morning, the carpet was pulled back, closets open, salt scattered on the floor.
If you did this, just tell me,
said Jean. Philip shook his head.
Not me, Mom, him.
In August 1969, the family went away for the weekend. When they returned, curtains were torn, cushions ripped, handprints in ash covered the walls. One had fingers longer than human. A week later, Jean found Diane floating half a meter above her bed. The girl was stiff, tears in her eyes, then she fell. She screamed in a voice that wasn't a child's. He said,
"He's a monk."
She sobbed later, and he stayed because he was punished. By 1971, no one slept peacefully. Jean and Joe took turns watching the children or stayed with friends. One night, as Jean was drifting to sleep in the living room, she heard footsteps. The sound of chains dragging across stone. She opened her eyes. In the mirror above the fireplace stood a man in a hooded robe. Right behind her, Jean screamed.
"Get out of my house!"
All candles went out at once, and the air filled with the smell of damp lime. Investigator Tom Cusack wrote, "Greasy cross on the mirror, soot marks on the walls, cold air and stench of decay." From that day on, Pontefract knew the name. The Black Monk. Legend said a monastery once stood there, and a monk was executed on that very ground. No one knows if it's true, but what they saw in that house was real. Year 1972. The Pritchard family was living in constant tension. Diane was afraid to fall asleep, and Philip refused to stay in the house alone. Joe Pritchard tried to appear calm, but neighbors noticed that even he would wake at night and step outside just to breathe fresh air. One morning, Jean found a message written in chalk on the table. Leave. None of them had ever seen any chalk in the house. That spring, members of a local spiritualist group came to investigate. They brought a tape recorder and candles, hoping to communicate with whatever still lingered there. During the session, a tapping sound came from inside the walls. When the group's leader asked,
Who are you?
a single word answered, deep, distorted, but clear.
Monk.
One of the men swore he saw in the candlelight the shadow of a figure kneeling in the corner of the room. On the wall behind it appeared a damp stain shaped like a cross. By autumn of 1972, the family finally left the house for good. They left behind only what they couldn't take: a bed, a mirror, and Diane's old notebook. The last line inside read,
He never found peace.
After they moved out, another family moved in. Within the first week, they called the police. Lights turned on by themselves at night, and a figure in a black robe appeared on the wall. The officers checked every window. Everything was locked. One wrote in his report, "The place feels unnaturally cold." Over the years, the house became known as the most haunted in Britain. In the year 2012, filmmakers spent the night there while shooting a documentary. During the night, alarms on the cameras went off, lenses shifted on their own, and a faint breathing sound was recorded. No one was in the house at the time, People still say that if you walk by in the rain, you can see a shadowed figure in the curtain, just for a second before it disappears. Others claim that at night they've heard the sound of chains being dragged across the floor. When you listen to this story, you might wonder what really happened there. Was it the spirit of a monk who never completed his penance? Or the energy of a place that remembers pain and returns it to anyone who enters? I believe some houses are more than just buildings. They're vessels holding everything people once felt inside them: fear, sorrow, and guilt. And when there's too much of it, the house takes a breath and starts to answer. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss the next dark chapter of Foggy Truth. And now, turn off all the lights. Look into the mirror, not at yourself, but just beyond your reflection.
They say if you stare long enough,
You'll see the face the house never forgot.